Hi, my name is Mike Callen. I'm an economics PhD student at the University of California, San Diego. My background is in randomized control trials that look at issues of governance, and most recently we've been focusing on trials that have to do with using information communications technology to improve governance and to reduce corruption. I found out about the Punjab model, or the citizens feedback model, through a colleague of mine at the World Bank who was familiar with two randomized control trials I'd just completed that had to do with using cell phones to monitor fraud, electoral fraud during elections. We started in Afghanistan, and based on successes there, we kind of scaled the program and did it with smartphones and a smartphone application in Uganda. So this seems like a very natural fit given my history and experience doing these type of randomized control trials. It also was immediately interesting to me personally because in the course of developing these ideas, it became very clear that there's a logic which suggests that they should also work for monitoring service delivery. And potentially the power of these trials of these technologies is much more considerable when you bring it to the day-to-day issue of petty service and petty service delivery. And so that's what motivated our interest in the.
So you've been working on this model, and you talked about randomized control trials. We'll get back to randomized control trials towards the end because that's sort of like what you want to lean into, at the tail end of this project. But I'd like to talk to you about scalability because right now it's a model, and it's something that's being served to the Punjab, the system, and we're trying to get it to be taken up. So in terms of scalability, how do you think this is, or how would you say, based on your observations, how is this changing things? And what's the potential for it to change things?
So I'll address scalability first and then effects second. So there are two features of information communications technology in governance that give me lots of faith in its ability to scale. The first is the logic of aggregating quickly a lot of information that then allows you to understand more about misbehaviors that otherwise would go undetected without some kind of high-powered monitoring technology is very compelling. And so I think this logic applied in elections and should apply in service delivery. It's just a matter of kind of adapting it and customizing it to the various contexts. So I think there's potential for it to apply reasonably to a very broad set of applications. The second reason to have confidence in the potential for scalability is that it's well suited to viral adoption. It uses things that people already have, which are their own cell phones. There's really not a big sort of capital outlay required to get such a program started. And I think that this holds true broadly for many information communication technology based development innovations, but there's no reason why that potential for quick and cost-effective scaling doesn't apply to this. Now, on the issue of effects, with this specific program, I think we expect that it could have substantial effects. And our basis for that is kind of the common sense idea that increasing the probability that misbehavior is detected, provided that there's some penalty for having committed a misbehavior or for asking for a bribe or any other sort of corruption, it should go down. I think that this is common sense logic and is kind of at the back of most economic theories of corruption. We also have had tremendous success with the randomized control trials we ran in Afghanistan and in Uganda, so extrapolating from those experiences, we have some hope that this might similarly be successful. But I think there are a few challenges for success. One is the issue of sustainability. So, this changes one thing, it changes visibility on misbehaviors, but it doesn't change something which is much more important and fundamental, which is sort of the political incentives to push corrupt agents into doing their job or into not taking bribes. And it's, this program is built with an eye to kind of providing the right incentives for people who should have some interest, so mid-level officers, supervisory officers, and senior officers whose career advancement incentives possibly outweigh the cost to them of chasing down a corrupt petty bureaucrat and transferring them or administering some other sort of penalty. But the record of success for these types of programs, at least in terms of having them be sustainable, is reasonably mixed. And so that's challenge one. Challenge two, and the program actually has its own built-in feedback mechanisms that will allow it to deal with this. are issues, kind of technical issues. So I think the devil is going to be in the details on this program, and kind of getting information relayed correctly, preventing scamming on the part of bureaucrats who are being monitored, and their efforts to undermine the program are going to really be at the heart of whether or not this thing succeeds. But the nice thing about it is that it feeds itself a lot of information. So all the information on bribes taken, calls placed to service beneficiaries, all this kind of continually populates the database in real time. And so having this continual feedback stream allows one to do a lot of learning about where it's weak and where it's strong and how to improve it.
Okay. And so when you're looking at corruption, I mean, is there a specific aspect of the, so, we've been talking about the Punjab model, but can you tell us more about, like, what level of corruption are we looking at? I mean, like, what scope? We talked about.
So this is, I think, a novel program in the sense that it targets specifically petty corruption. And petty corruption is very important to target in Pakistan based on what we know about kind of the prevalence and the scale of corruption in the country. For two reasons.
What is petty corruption?
So petty corruption would be asking for a bribe from someone who's trying to avail themselves of a basic service, a service that most citizens need on kind of a monthly basis or bi-monthly basis. This is being tried out for people who are delivering children, who are getting glucose strips in rural health centers and basic health units. It's also being applied for people who are trying to get driver's licenses, people who are trying to register property, transactions that any normal person is going to have, at some point in their life with the state. And there's a logic for why this should be this is the main point of interaction for most citizens of Pakistan with the government. And I think that's true generally in most countries. You kind of only really think about issues of governance when you actually have to go and involve yourself with the government somehow. In Pakistan, this is especially relevant because there is a legitimacy question. And the idea is that you would like to convince people that the government is serious about kind of making sure that these services are provided correctly, efficiently, and without the need for a bribe to be paid. The potential benefits for kind of consolidating perceptions and belief in legitimacy and support for the government are huge.
So as far as your study goes, what do you plan to do with the studies that you're proposing, and what kind of timeline, what kind of skill do you think you'd need to be able to tell people, like, all right, this is really working or this isn't working?
So there are two functions for the study. The first and most important, in my view, is that it would allow us to have some credible sense of whether or not it's achieving what it's purported to do, which is reducing corruption. And the reason we want this estimate is so that we have some sense of whether or not it's worth the time, effort, and energy various policymakers, international donors, and others are putting into bringing this program to life. The second benefit, I think, of an evaluation is allows some careful calibration of how the program works, and it allows kind of careful thinking through of the proper modalities and the proper structuring of the program. And so kind of practically the way we'd implement would be to try kind of 3 or 4 different competing models that have subtle tweaks between them, and assess kind of by doing a comparison which ones seem to be more effective. Now, in terms of the timeline, this program generates data reasonably quickly, and corruption is a behavior that we expect to change, potentially overnight or maybe in a matter of weeks. And so, by contrast with many randomized control trials, which, require you to wait a while for test scores to improve in response to a new kind of training methodology, or health outcomes to improve in response to some new effort to improve health, the behavioral response in terms to an anti-corruption effort should be immediate. And so I think it's possible that we might be able to see and have kind of some faith in effects as a result of the trial as soon as 4 or 5 months out.